Anger is the silent saboteur we rarely talk about, yet it profoundly shapes our mental and physical health. Welcome to PhD with Woman on It, Hack the Future, where we uncover the truths that helps us thrive and leave positive notes. My name is Beata Young, and today's PhD Positivity Hack delivered will be by our guest, Bronwyn Schweigerdt. Topic we are diving into Silent Saboteur, how acknowledged anger impacts your well being. Episode 168 starts here. Let me remind you, this is a grassroots community that focuses on women on IT, an inclusive forum of women in technology, startups, and female leaders who are supported by men as well. And I bring heart to that hustle because empathy is my motto, and empathy is critical when you are dealing with anger. First, let me mention we are thrilled to share that Rone de Behavior has been selected as an entrepreneur of impact by Damon John of Shark Tank for her work with the unbanked. We encourage our Women on It community to cast a vote. The link is in the comment. A huge congratulations to our former PhD guest Nina Ma for starting an exciting new chapter as part of Venture Institute, cohort 4 at VC Labs. We are rooting for your success and all of your future endeavors. Join our former PhD guest Emily Cherkin on February 6th as she shares insights on media addiction in kids and strategies for prevention with Dr. James Winston Jr., the founder of Winston Family Initiative in Technology and Brain Development. Now let's go back to our topic, the silent saboteur, how acknowledged anger impacts your well-being. We're thrilled to feature Bronwyn, a licensed psychotherapist, speaker, and renowned anger expert, host of the podcast Angry at the Right Things. Bronwyn combines her expertise in counseling and nutrition to help listeners heal their relationship with anger and ultimately with themselves. Learn why suppressing anger can lead to stagnation, depression, and unresolved resentment, and how addressing these emotions can unlock healing, clarity in decision making, and improve emotional regulation. Let's start with a simple question for Bronwyn. Where in the world are you today?
I am in Sacramento, California.
It's a beautiful location, and we want to start with your personal journey. Was there a defining moment in your life that made you realize the power of addressing anger, both in your own journey or in helping others?
Yeah, that's a great question. I didn't realize the importance of anger until late in the game, unfortunately, and that brought me a lot of suffering. So, psychotherapy, being a therapist, is my second career. My first career was actually nutrition, and I had a master's degree. I didn't want to ever go back to school and get another one. But as life would have it, I fell into a very, very profound depression. And I got very sick physically. I got sick in that I was involuntarily vomiting at random times. Walking down the street, I would just vomit and I couldn't control it. And it was very humiliating. Total strangers seeing this while I was driving my car at times as well. And I also couldn't stop eating during that time. So I gained probably, I don't know the ratio of weights in Europe, but 30 pounds. So I went from a size 2 to a size 12 in about a couple months. So it was really, really a very humiliating time for me. And I was very depressed. And I sought out a therapist. I sought out a good therapist who would help me understand myself and make sense of why I felt like I was losing my mind and not able to function. And I couldn't find that good therapist. So I remember sitting in the therapist's chair and thinking to myself, Bronwyn, you're barely functional right now, but I still think you would make a better therapist than this person. So my resolution was to go back to school and become the therapist that I needed for myself. So that's what I did. But looking back in retrospect at that depressive episode, and then I had a subsequent one, probably a year and a half, 2 years later, that lasted for years. I see the common denominator was my own suppressed anger, both of those times, and how I disassociated from my anger and how sick that made me physically, mentally. And I, as a therapist, started seeing this in my clients, not just with depression, but with anxiety, panic attacks, even mania. That's the common denominator. So that's kind of why I decided to specialize in anger, because I feel like anger is the one emotion that no one seems to understand. Even therapists, even the mental health community gets it wrong. So,
Why do you say they get it wrong? What do they get wrong?
oh, yeah. So a lot of therapists will say, let's manage it. Let's do anger management. And I really have come to strongly dislike that term, because we're looking at anger as if it is inherently problematic, and as if that person who is angry is problematic, as if their anger just purely comes from inside of them, like they act in isolation. And we don't see that anger is a relational problem. It doesn't happen by ourselves. It always needs another person to be catalyzed. And we need to look at that dynamic. Why is that person angry? So I view anger as like a light on the dashboard of our car. And it says, hey, check the engine. Something's wrong. And our goal with checking the engine is to bring about resolution. And so if we can see anger as a barometer, as a warning that something is off and needs correction in our lives, and it is relational, then we don't see it as inherently bad. So anger management treats the symptoms. It says, okay, do some deep breathing, go for a walk, blah, blah, blah. But it's not looking at anger as something to give us wisdom. Let's see what this anger is trying to warn us, trying to tell us about.
Mm. So also it's very interesting that you talk about anger management, because in the business world everybody is like, oh, you have to have some anger management issues, whereas you debunk this myth of anger management, and you find the positives of anger, because it is a reaction response. So how do we recognize the root cause? Because sometimes anger comes out of this build-up, that all of a sudden comes unexpected during conversation with your loved ones.
Yeah, I mean, with that question, I would say you have been dissociative from your anger for a long time with this loved one, and just kind of overridden your anger. You've talked yourself out of it, right? You say, oh, he doesn't mean it that way. That's not, I'll give him the benefit of the doubt. Oh, it's not a big deal. And when we do that to ourselves, we're doing everyone a disservice. We're talking ourselves out of our emotions, which doesn't work. We can't talk ourselves out of emotions. And then we end up erupting when it just gets too much. And that's not fair to anyone. So I'll give you an example with my own husband. About a year ago, we were going on a little one night out of town trip. And so I had asked him in advance, hey, can we just clean the house before we leave? That way we can take our time getting back tomorrow evening and whatever. So he's like, sure. So it's, I start cleaning, and he's still sitting there on his laptop reading the news. And so I realized, like, I have a choice right now. I can either tell him right in this moment, Steve, I'm starting to feel resentful because you told me that we'd both clean the house, and I'm starting to clean and you're still on your laptop. Or I can talk myself out of it and go, he'll start in a few minutes. And I chose to say, Steve, I'm starting to feel resentful. And he goes, oh, okay. And he immediately closed his laptop. And that prevented me from being really angry 5 minutes down the line, should he have stayed on his laptop. And it really was best for him and best for me. And it was a win-win. And so that's just a real easy example of that.
But that takes maturity, doesn't it? Because when I was young, I was very angry, and I remember dealing with my daughter's teenage anger. That was a very difficult time because I think the process of developing our brains takes time. So, would you agree with that?
Well, I will say what it takes, and this is really fundamental, is it takes us healing our relationship with anger. And so we can do that by just, when someone is, not coming through in the way that we expected them to, before we say or do anything, we just start with going, okay, you know what? I'm feeling angry right now. And that's okay. That is so okay, because this was the expectation and it's not happening. So I'm okay to feel that. And then we can say, where do I feel that in my body? Oh, I feel it in my chest. Okay. Yeah, that's okay. Here's my anger. I feel it. So if we start just doing that, that goes a long, long way, saying it's okay. And then the second step, what is this anger in my chest want to say or do? What is it there for? What do I need right now to be responsible with this anger? Okay, maybe I need to hold this person accountable. Maybe this is the 10th time this person has done this, and I see this pattern that occurs over and over. And so I need a boundary. Maybe I need to give this person an ultimatum. Maybe I need to just be assertive because I've never done that before with this person. So I can say, hey, B, we were, scheduled to meet at this time, and you're like 10 minutes late, and this happens a lot. So I'm feeling kind of frustrated with that. Can you tell me what you think that might be about? So those are all ways that we can be responsible with our anger. Notice I didn't yell, I didn't scream, I didn't disparage anyone. There's no need to do that if we learn to be responsible with our anger in real time. So those are some examples.
These are great examples. However, I remember from my time with my daughter, the
Mhm.
screaming was immediate reaction. How to vent without screaming? Is there other techniques you could recommend apart from these overthinking and thinking positives and
Yeah.
acknowledging? And sometimes the answers may not come.
Yes. So I was actually trained as someone to do, what is that called? Escalation techniques. So de-escalation, that's the word. De-escalation. So when I say that, think like someone who is called out to go with first responders when there is a potentially violent situation. That's what I'm talking about. And so when you are trained in de-escalation techniques and you are sent out to something that you said screaming, something beyond screaming, something that involves potential violence where there is a weapon of some sort, what we're trained to do as de-escalators is to validate that person's feelings. So let's say John has a gun and his ex-wife, Karina, is there, and she is, and he's pointing it at her. And so you come and that's all you see, and you're a de-escalator. What I would do is I'd say, John, I imagine you are so infuriated with Karina because she's your ex. She's coming around to pick up the kids. And I think you might feel really humiliated by her. Maybe some of the things she's saying, maybe that she's fighting you for custody. John, I don't blame you for feeling that way. So that's how I start. And you know what happens is John starts, it literally calms the right hemisphere of the brain. And John starts to go, yeah, thank you. Oh my God, someone understands how I feel. You just named how I'm feeling. So I named you feel angry. I imagine you feel humiliated. So I'm guessing, but I'm naming feelings that are probably close to what he's feeling, if not what he is feeling. So that calms, we call it name it to tame it. That calms. So we lead with validation. We lead, and that is empathy. Empathy is imagining what that person's feeling and naming it. So with your daughter, B, it's so counterintuitive, and it's not easy. I'm not going to lie. With a daughter, a teenage daughter, it's not easy because you're so activated yourself. But if we can just, breathe. So breathing would be helpful here. Breathe and go, okay, what do you think she's feeling right now? Well, I know she's angry because she's screaming. So I'd say, my daughter is Edie. I'd say, Edie, I hear how angry you are at me. I hear you loud and clear. And you know what? I actually don't blame you for being angry, because I know that you really hate that I have this rule for you. I know you hate that rule, and I see that is hard for you. That's hard for you because you are 17 and you feel like you shouldn't have that level of boundary, that I should trust you more, like your best friend, her mom trusts her. I get it. It must be really hard for you that I'm limiting you and I'm not trusting you more. So I just would start with that, and that's going to calm her down. It doesn't mean I'm not going to still have the limit, but it means I'm showing that I show understanding. I'm naming the feelings she has, and I am showing empathy for her, and that's going to calm her down.
It's amazing what you mentioned about negotiations. This is something I came across some interview with a professional negotiator, with hostage negotiator.
Mm-hmm.
And he mentioned that actually knowing your oppressor's name and
Mm-hmm.
letting them know your name is actually cutting this edge between, and this anger towards us is slightly diminished. That's very powerful technique. So definitely, in these times, would you say that still calling lovely dovely person that we love, still calling lovely dovely, even though we feel like UMF? Would you say it's a good technique, remembering these beautiful times and beautiful names we call each other, and starting with that?
I think for us personally, yes, that's a great technique. So I think B, what I hear you bringing up right now is something that is inherent to all of us humans. When someone is pissing us off, it's easy to go to all bad. Like right now, I know you're my daughter and I know I love you, but you're enemy number one, right? So it's so easy to forget who they are and why we love them. And it's so easy to just see them as they're our nemesis. So yeah, to just remind ourselves, okay, this is the same person that, a week ago we had this great connection together, and she told me, Mom, I love you. And this is the same person that I nursed at my breast, so reminding that, that's integration. So we're integrating this person who I hate right now is also the person I love, and we can integrate that for ourselves, and that helps us live in reality, really, is the bottom line.
Mm. The silent saboteur, why would you call it the saboteur, and how acknowledge anger manifest in our mental and physical health?
Yeah. So going back to my Great Depression episodes, it was a saboteur. It absolutely, but at the same time, I learned so much. So I wouldn't want to revisit that. I wouldn't want to relive it, but I am grateful at the end of the day for what I went through. But I know that I see so clearly that I'll just delineate a little bit more about those depressive episodes. So the first one was more acute. It didn't last. It probably lasted 4 or 5 months, where I was throwing up and eating nonstop. But the first one was my dissociated anger at my husband. So we had just moved to a new city, and it was only an hour and a half away from where we lived before, but it might as well have been the dark side of the moon, because I knew no one. I didn't know a single person. I did not have employment at that time. I left the job behind. We took this move was for him and his job that he got. So I was just alone. I was so incredibly lonely. And one night, a few nights after we moved, actually, I just looked at him, and I don't remember what I said. I'm pretty sure I looked really desperate for him to empathize with me, because that's what I was seeking. And, he didn't do that for me. He refused to do that for me. He withheld that empathy from me. And I know now that was because of his own guilty feelings, because he knew that the reason I was struggling so much was for his job that caused us to relocate. So he was kind of not wanting to feel more guilty by giving me that empathy in that moment. But for me, I think I was just so triggered. I felt like he was absolutely failing me. Like, it felt like such a betrayal. He's my life partner, and he's not showing any empathy or kindness or understanding for me when I need him so desperately. So that anger that I did not acknowledge just went underground, and it literally stagnates in our bodies. Just because it's invisible doesn't mean it's not real. In fact, I believe anger is as real as this chair I'm sitting on and this laptop I'm speaking to you on. So it stagnates in our bodies. And that was the minute I started to fall into the Great Depression. And I believe it also is what triggered the vomiting and the hunger, because it was like my inner child, little Bronwyn, from her mom, who never empathized with her, who never recognized her, was very triggered. And so I believe that's why I couldn't stop eating, because that emptiness that we feel when we have a lack of nurture, especially, well, from an attachment figure. So starting with my mom, and then now at my current attachment figure, who is my partner, that emptiness was triggered, and I couldn't stop eating. Like, I couldn't get full. I believe that's why I was vomiting, because that's where we store shame, is in our gut. And I believe I was experiencing a lot of shame that little Bronwyn felt when her mom refused to look her in the eyes and give her any empathy.
That requires a lot of knowledge of psychology, and a lot of maturity, in terms of you revisited your um, childhood trauma, and you could establish what that trauma was.
Mm.
Can everybody deal with anger without psychologist's help?
Well, you say, B, that it's psychology, but I'm the only one in the therapeutic community who says these things that I know of, to this degree. So I don't see it as psychology. I see it more as just self-reflection, self-awareness, self-knowledge. If we get to know ourselves, if we stay with ourselves, if we take time to just pause and reflect and go, what the hell is going on with me right now? And that takes time, and that takes commitment, and that takes us being true to ourselves, us prioritizing ourselves, which takes time. But if we do prioritize ourselves, if we sit with ourselves and we say, what am I feeling right now? Why am I feeling like this extreme right now? What's this about? We will. I believe our inner child wants us to know, wants to communicate with us. And she does that through our body. Our body is always speaking to us. So when we have insomnia, when we have migraines, when we have digestive disorders, when we have vertigo, when we have, chronic pain, or even autoimmune disorders, I believe our body is speaking to us. It's saying, wake up. I'm trying to tell you something. I need you to attune to me. I need you to prioritize me. I need you to let me share what I'm feeling with you. I want to share that with you. And so we can work together as a team to do something about it.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for this word of advice. Bronwyn, while you establish your screen a little bit in the middle, because you're at the moment a bit skewed here. Yes, that's much better. I'm going to bring a comment from Renee de Belvier saying, thanks for sharing. Thank you, Renee. We are always supporting other females who are working in the field of technology. So Let's go to this bias of women in their leadership positions. We talked about it, Bronwyn, because before we came to this show, we have this notion of women are either too weak or too aggressive or too angry when they um, talk as a
Yeah.
leader. So, how to avoid that bias, and is there ways of management that you would recommend to really cut this notion of we are aggressive, we are angry?
Yeah, I mean, I will just name that that sounds like misogyny to me, and I believe that women absolutely buy into misogyny. So the first step would be saying that's misogyny, and I refuse to be a part of that. I refuse to ascribe to that as a woman. We can have all our feelings, just like men can have all their feelings, and women are no different than men. We're all human, and we all have lots of feelings. If a man feels emasculated by a woman, that's their problem, not ours. So we don't need to manage ourselves. I do believe, I'm very Freudian, and I do believe that there are a lot of men who relate to women like we're their mothers. They project onto us. And if we are too forward, if we name things that are maybe a little threatening to them or a little too challenging, they project their controlling mothers onto us. I'm just going to put that all out there. I think that's very real.
Do you think societal expectations influence how we handle anger? Because boys are okay to
Yeah.
just beat each other,
Yes.
whereas girls have to behave properly and dress properly and not scream at the top of their lungs.
Well, that starts in very early in childhood where, boys are taught it's shameful to cry. And that is really a travesty. So they're basically being taught don't be vulnerable. Vulnerable feelings from you are shameful, and you'll be shamed for your vulnerability. And that does them a disservice. That does their future, should they marry, wife a disservice. Like that creates so much havoc and dysfunction for the whole society, for the cosmos. Um, and then girls, ironically, are allowed to cry. That's okay, but they're not allowed to be angry. And so it's funny because so many of my clients who are women, they'll cry, but they're angry tears. They are not sad tears. They're angry. But that was acceptable in their childhood, was to cry, but they're actually angry. So yeah, there's just this complete, hypocrisy around all this. And it's really, really sad. And it really affects us all. It affects us in our marriages. It affects us in society at large. Absolutely.
So your series, Angry at the Right Things, talks about being angry at the right things. What are the right things to be angry about?
Yeah. So again, so sometimes, there definitely are people who get labeled as angry people. Um, I don't like that term because that's like saying, oh, she's a breathing person. Okay, we all have anger, whether we show it or display it or acknowledge it or not. We all have anger, all humans. But there are some people who just seem chronically angry all the time, angry at the world. If that, and I've been that person at times. So that is really on me to go, why am I always angry? What is going on? What's at the root? So go to the root. Why am I triggered all the time? Where is that coming from? And to look into that and to be responsible for it and to bring resolution to it. Um, but then there's also people who are just going through life and they live with a partner who is just infuriating, like objectively infuriating, who gaslights them, who dismisses their issues when they bring them up. There's also things like that. So that's, you know, we need to look at that. We need to follow the root. We need to see what's going on. Well, I have a partner who dismisses all my feelings, who minimizes me, who gaslights me. So we just have to lead or follow the anger and see what it stems from and bring it to resolution.
That's interesting because sometimes we have to deal with angry currents. And I remember we were talking, I was on the phone with a friend of mine, and he was telling me that he's just at this parking next to a shopping mall, and he noticed a woman parking on disabled area, and she walked without any disability. And he was like, oh, I have to stop her, and so on. And really, is that the right point to be angry about? Or would you advise people to let go of these little angers that may escalate into something deeper?
Well, okay, so B, let me ask you, you mentioned parents and then you gave this other example of this person who they weren't related. So can you say more about the parents? Because I think that everyone's ears are probably perking right now when you bring that up.
Well, it's interesting because he strikes me as a person who wants to do the right thing for the world to be a better place. So I get it that he was very upset about this woman who parked at the wrong
Mm.
spot. However, on the other hand, like, we have to sometimes let go of things and let them pass, because there are too many things to worry about.
So was
Don't you
this a
think?
parent that you're referring to, or?
No, that was not my parent. That was just a friend who was talking to
Oh,
me about some unrelated things. And all of a sudden, he noticed this woman, and he was telling me, like, I've got to stop this conversation because I can see this woman. She's parking on the
okay.
disabled parking. And so I'm just wondering, how do we deal with these situations that
Well,
we feel are
let me ask you one more thing.
injustice?
Is
Yeah.
this friend of yours, does he represent like an angry parent who's just mad at things that maybe don't need to be discussed or looked into? Is that why you brought up the parents?
No, the parents was really my experience with my daughter. So that was
You were the
completely
parent.
unrelated. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Because I mean, I'm happy to talk about relating to our angry parents, like as adults too, if you want to talk about that.
Well, we can delve into that topic, but first, let's relate to these kind of situations. When we see injustice
Yeah.
in the broader sense, we are in a communal area and we
Mhm.
see something happening around us. Do we react, or do we let it go, or do we breathe? What would be your technique?
I wish there was like a uniform answer, one size fits all. But I think just bringing that up, you know, I think to really do justice would be, let's say I see someone parking in a handicap parking spot and they're not handicapped. I would start with reflection, self reflection. Okay, I'm really angry right now. Why am I so angry? This probably happens all the time. It probably happens every day, and I don't see it. Why am I feeling so angry? And to gain insight. Oh, you know what? I actually think this reminds me of, like, as a kid, this bully that would claim to be disabled and he wasn't. Or, I don't know, maybe there's something, but it's a trigger for me because it reminds me of this kid who bullied me or some experience I had in my childhood. And so to have that self awareness, okay, so because when we're triggered, we feel things disproportionately in the present than we did from the past. So if, I'll give you an example. I know a current trigger for me, even today, is when I'm talking to someone and they look away while I'm talking. And that triggers little Bronwyn because that was like her life experience with her mother, um, who didn't ever make eye contact, like ever. And so I feel really triggered in that moment. And I need to be responsible for my trigger. My trigger belongs to me. That is not my husband's responsibility. It is not my daughter's. It's my responsibility. And so I can be self aware. And when someone that I love I'm talking to looks away, I tell myself, okay, little Bronwyn, it's okay. I know he's looking away right now, but he is still listening. He is. And that's okay because I'm listening too. And what you're saying is really important to me. And I hear you. So that's how I manage my trigger.
Hmm. So now we have a question from Olga Vasina. Lovely to see you, Olga. She's asking, fabulous show. Thank you, Bata Bronwyn. You explained how to deal with an angry person. How about groups, example, hostile audience or group in a meeting? Thank you.
Yeah. So, yeah, depending on how that group was. So if it's a meeting and if I'm hearing anger and I'm in the meeting, whether that anger is directed at me personally or at someone else, I would just name it. I'd say, wow, John, I'm hearing some anger here, you know? And if I had time and if I had the liberty, I might say, I just want to acknowledge that. Is there more you want to say? Or is that something we should revisit after this? Is that something we should talk about one-on-one? Like, what's going on? So, again, that's not always possible, but we really need to be creative in those situations. But naming it, I think, is step one. We name it, because it's already happening. It's the elephant in the room. And by naming it, that calms that person. It gives them permission to feel angry. So it's going to help regulate their anger. That's kind of, I think, how I would move forward with that.
Now, it's a great question to delve into online anger because I think there is lots of hateful comments
Yes.
and online anger. Would you be able to tell us or explain to those influencers who are creating blog posts or content online and they met with anger? How should they deal with that?
Yeah. So it's interesting, B, that you said hate. I actually don't think what most people experience online is anger, it's hate, which is a different emotion. And I tend to believe that there are so many people who are just filled with hatred, and people who are filled with hatred want to deflect their hatred onto kind of anyone they can so they don't have to feel their own hatred of themselves. That's how, sick people work.
Mm.
And so, you know, online is a really easy place for those people to hide behind the screen and be anonymous hate dumpers, and so that is unfortunately just how it goes. They can feel powerful um, by being like a weak person to do that, but they can make themselves feel powerful. They're getting a sense of power. They're deriving that by deflecting that hatred onto you. So, rule number one, I wouldn't take that personally because that is a reflection, not of you, but of them. That is a reflection of their sickness, not of you. Because if they weren't a healthy person, they would be very specific and they'd say, hey, you know what? I don't like how you say this or do this, and this is hard for me. That's what a safe person does. A safe person will like engage in a real conversation and they'll be specific. But an unsafe person is just going to deflect hate onto you. So if that makes sense.
Absolutely. Rene de Bevier is listening to us while she's preparing for a flight to Geneva. Lovely to hear from you. Rene is saying the anger of a handicapped parking should realize that for some people, such as myself, the issue is in the back. This is excellent and it should be reposted on other platforms. Thank you so much, Rene, for your words of support. Now, you mentioned that there is a difference between anger and hate.
Mm.
And anger and aggression. How do you distinguish the two, and why is this distinction so important?
Yeah. So hate is a real emotion that we do not talk enough about. Um, and it's an okay emotion to have, but if you really, I think it's something that we Westerners need to talk a lot more about. We kind of all collectively disassociate from that word. We don't even use it except like we don't use it about people for the most part. We'll say like, oh, I hate that movie. That was a horrible movie. But I think, again, coming back to the goal for me, for mental health, physical health, is to live in reality. So if I genuinely feel disgusted by someone, and by the way, hate and disgust are synonymous, and we feel those feelings in our gut. So if I am feeling really disgusted by someone, and we're going to feel disgusted by someone when they betray us in some way. So we feel betrayal in our gut. Those are feelings that show up in our gut. So if someone is, let's say, deflecting their hatred on me, deriving that power that they're seeking to have because they don't feel powerful in their lives. So online, they make a really nasty comment on my podcast or something like that, because that gives them that power that they want. I would read that hate-filled comment and I would feel it in my gut. I'd feel disgust. And I can just say to myself, kind of like I gave the example of with the anger, ooh, I feel disgust in my gut right now. And that's an okay feeling to have. It's okay to hate this person right now. I'm not saying I want to hate this person. I'm not intentionally, fueling that hatred with intent to seek revenge. I'm just acknowledging the truth that my body is responding in a way where I'm just disgusted with this person. And so when we can just admit that to ourselves and see that that is not shameful, that is not a bad thing, that's a natural human response, and that's okay, then I'm going to feel better.
You connect counseling with nutrition in your work. How does what we eat affect how we experience and manage anger?
Yeah. So I used to be all about, if everyone just ate a really healthy diet, all these diseases, migraines, vertigo, everything would be better. And now I'm to the opposite point. I wouldn't have ever believed I'd be here now. But I believe when we heal ourselves by healing our relationship with anger, with our inner child, then we just naturally want to self-nurture. We naturally want to eat healthy food, and we cannot put the cart before the horse. As we heal ourselves, we naturally want to nurture ourselves. We want to take the best care of ourselves, and it just energizes us and we feel more energetic. So I've had clients, who are getting better emotionally with me, and they'll come to the next session and go, I'm starting to Google recipes, really healthy recipes, and I'm starting to shop at farmers markets, and I'm making all these healthy recipes. And it's like they just do it for themselves because something in them is coming alive. And so when we heal our relationship with ourselves, we naturally come more alive, and we want to stay more alive, and we want to do that. So that comes first.
That comes first. You can, if anybody's watching us, you can relate to previous episode when we talked about the secret of dieting, and also we talked about how to avoid processed food. Now, what advice would you give to females to help their career, and what would be your number 3 top advice how to deal with anger and how to be successful in the workplace?
Yeah, so I would say we haven't really talked about shame today yet, but if you listen to my podcast, I talk a lot about shame. I have a specific short segment I think it's called Dislodging Shame Residue. And it is to talk the listener through doing an exercise with themselves. So I do these exercises. I do them for myself. I do them with my clients, and I have them on my podcast for listeners to do for themselves. And as we can integrate with our inner child, as we can remove the shame from ourselves, and I believe that is imperative. Shame causes us to not trust ourselves. It causes us to second guess ourselves. It, removes the ability to be truly confident in a healthy way, to be assertive with others because we don't feel we can trust ourselves to do that. shame impedes and, negates all of these things. So I would really start with like dislodging shame from your body. And again, shame lives in the gut too. Where disgust lives, I see disgust and shame. Shame is a type of self-disgust. And I believe shame is a lie. I believe shame is enemy number one. It is the enemy of humankind. It is rooted in a lie because we as humans are not inherently shameful. There is no human who is inherently shameful. We can have behavior, that is maybe what we would call shameful behavior, but humans are not shameful. And so shame twists things. It lies to us. It deceives us. It makes us believe we can't trust ourselves, that we're wrong. And it keeps us from being true to ourselves. It keeps us from being authentic, genuine, whole people.
Mm. Well, it's very powerful maybe for next episode, Bronwyn, because today we are just focusing on anger. And since we are talking about anger, let's talk about Eleanor Roosevelt, great quotations, which is talking about women are like tea bags. We don't know our true strength until we are put in hot water. So in life, how are you in hot water? How are you brewing, Bronwyn?
I love that quote. I was so happy to see that quote. So I think that is so true. And it's a different way to look at things. Really, what Eleanor Roosevelt is doing is she's kind of creating this different lens, that suffering, that things that we wouldn't want to experience, things that are too challenging, that are painful in our lives, are also the most amazing opportunity. That's how I see things as a therapist. That's how I now see things as humans. There's nothing in life that is not bittersweet. Everything that is good or sweet has a bitter side to it. Everything that has bitterness has a sweet to it. And so suffering or pain in life is hard. And I would not go through my depressive episodes ever again. I wouldn't wish those on my worst enemy. But through those years, I learned what I know now, and I am able to help so many people. And I'm so grateful I went through those. So, and my second depressive episode is when I kind of like became my own therapist, and I gave back the shame that I had absorbed from other people. I gave it back to them in my mind, first and foremost. So, as we rise up to those challenges that life gives us that are inevitable, as we rise up, that very act of rising up, standing up for ourselves, standing firm, standing steadfast, is the healing, is the learning, gives us wisdom and makes us stronger. It's like when you work out at a gym, the only way to build new muscle is to tear down the little muscle fibers that you have. And it creates stress and pain, but it also creates new muscles. And so that's really the paradigm that I love, that I'm seeing in Eleanor Roosevelt's quote.
So we should express gratitude for hot water because after all, that's what builds us up and makes us stronger.
Yeah.
Speaking of great quotes, great words, what is the number one book you can sit and think, oh, I wish I read before I started my career?
Yeah, I love the book Untamed by Glennon Doyle. It's one of my all-time favorite books, and she calls it Untamed. She talks about why it's untamed as a title in the first chapter. And the first chapter, I'll just share with you in a nutshell. She's at a zoo with her children, and she sees this cheetah that they have tamed in the zoo because they got it as a baby, and they conditioned it by domesticating it. They actually raised it with dogs, and I believe they were golden retrievers, that they put it in like a group of golden retrievers, and it believed it was a golden retriever, this little cheetah. And so they conditioned it, and when she was there, the cheetah was mature, but they were showing it jumping through hoops and sitting on command and all these things. And it was like playing with a golden retriever. And she just kind of came to this epiphany watching this. And she's like, oh my God, that's a cheetah that thinks it's a golden retriever. And she related to it. And she's like, I am that cheetah that has been conditioned my life to be a golden retriever. Oh my God. So she had this wake up, and it was so beautiful. I'm not even doing it justice because she's such a beautiful writer. But she's also so honest and raw. And that's what I think so many people love about Glennon Doyle, about, her journey of trying to reclaim her own, inherent value, who she really is, and come into herself.
Mm. In the word of golden retrievers, be a cheetah, in other words. Now,
if you are a cheetah, be a cheetah. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Be yourself, everybody else is taken. That's another quotation we like. Let's imagine that you could meet anyone in the world for a private breakfast. Who would it be and where would you go to?
It would be my mom, who is deceased. And I would love to just kind of set the record straight with her, and just say, Mom, you neglected me my whole life emotionally, except when you wanted me to nurture you as an adult. And you really missed out. I think you saw, nurturing a young child as a burden, that would drain you in a way. And I can kind of see why you concluded that. I think a lot of parents do conclude that, unfortunately. But as a mother myself, I need to let you know that you missed out. We both missed out, actually. And nurturing a little human is a gift. It is an honor. And it does take work and it does take sacrifice, but it gives back. And the nurturing that you give also nurtures you in response. It's reciprocated in that you yourself are nurtured in that process. And I enjoyed my little girl so much. And I just see how you missed out on that. And it was so sad that we both missed out on that. And yeah, I would just kind of just set that record straight and just let her know, I'm glad, Mom, that I learned from your mistake. I'm glad I didn't repeat it.
That's incredible what you're talking, because I spoke to my friend who wanted to have this kind of conversation. Alas, her mother is repeating her parents' issues, and that's like a cycle that unfortunately she cannot break. Would you see that your mother would understand, or what would you see as a response? Do you think that would set the record straight and be a better outcomes?
Yeah, I do think she would understand somewhat, because there was a time when I became a therapist where I did confront her and I said, Mom, I needed you. And she was in shock, which I think a lot of parents would be. I don't think she ever had anyone say that to her. I don't think she thought she had anything to offer me. I don't think she had any idea that I did need her. I think if she'd known that when I was a child, if I had the capacity to say, Mom, I need you, she would have stepped up to it somewhat. I think she felt so ashamed of herself that she had nothing of worth or value to give me. I think she felt rejected by me when I was independent as a child. And she just read into that and made her own conclusion, which was false. So when I told her that, I said, I didn't need all these friends at school. I didn't need, the boyfriend. I needed you. She just was like, oh my God, you needed me? And tears came to her eyes. So I think she would be able to take that in.
Would you say you're still angry with your mom?
Not when I remember certain things, I just talk out loud to her. I don't know if she's listening. I don't really care. It's really for me. But I'll
Mm.
say, you know what? That was really shitty when you did that. I'll just say it out loud. I'll take my dog for a walk and I'll talk to my mom, and it feels great. So I do it more for me though.
That's a good advice. Anyone can become angry, that is easy. But to be angry with the right person to the right degree at the right time for the right purposes in the right way, this is not easy, Aristotle said.
Mm-hmm.
Beautiful quotation. Now, speaking of quotation, what is your life lesson quote and how did it change you?
Oh yeah, my life lesson quote. Well, I love. Oh, what did I know I wrote these down beforehand, and I don't remember what I wrote for that quote.
I'll
Um,
help you.
yeah,
Anna Isnin, and the day came when the risk to remain tied in a bud was more painful than the risk it took to blossom.
that's it. That's it. I love that quote. Um, so time is. So again, looking back to the Eleanor Roosevelt quote, that hot water. I'll have clients who say, the only reason I am the place I am today, doing as well as I am, was because things had to be so hard. They had to be so hard, kind of like the Anais Nin quote is saying, that it was harder for them to remain tight in a bud like they had done until that point. So that's kind of what the hot water does. The hot water can be that factor in our lives that's like, oh, okay, I'm going to have to rise up. I have put this off my whole life. I have never stood up. I have never risen up to embody myself fully and be true to myself. And so that hot water can be that catalyst for us and that the outcome of that is that we finally blossom. But that's what pain can do. And that's the good part of pain in our lives.
Beautiful quotation. Thank you so much for sharing it with us. We've got to finish this on a positive note. So let's bring some Irish idiom here, which is when you're angry, you're carrying the burden while the other person is out dancing. So that's definitely a couple of suggestions from Bronwyn today, how to deal with anger and how to really establish a good, healthy relationship with anger. Bronwyn, thank you so much for sharing your insights and experiences with us today. Your work is not only transforming the lives of people, but also paving the way for a more sustainable future. We're all living here today feeling inspired and positive. And that's it from episode 168 of PHE live stream. To stay updated and ensure you never miss another positivity hack delivered, stay tuned and enjoy our next episode when we're going to talk to Erika Maureen Carter how to build and believe in your talent, taking control of your professional journey. Thank you so much to Olga Vesina and Rene. As always, our positivity quote comes from positive thinking only, and it goes, look for something positive in each day, even if your anger is very hard, even if you have to look a little bit harder. And finally, as Maya Angelou says, if you don't like something, change it. If you can't change it, change your attitude.
Hmm.
Today is your day, ladies and gentlemen, to hack the future, hack the positivity you want. Thank you.